Hey, JJ here with the Art of Value. So today it's Superinvestor Portfolio Update Day. I think a lot of you will already know about Data Roma. And this time of year, after the last quarter, this is about the time that 13Fs or reports from various investors with big funds come out, so we can see what they've been buying and selling over the last quarter. I know there's a contingent of people who clone other, but super investor portfolios. But for me, it's just interesting to see what other investors have been buying and selling and when. And, people like Warren Buffett, I mean, why wouldn't we look at that? And so, there are a bunch that come out at the same time. So I'm going to go through some of these I've seen for the first time. So kind of reaction to that. And I could talk about this for hours, but I'm not going to. I've got a timer on this time, so I'm going to just keep it short, and maybe I'll talk about some more as they are released. It's the 50th, mid-May, so it's the time we see quarter one, Q1 2022. And so I've picked a few. Actually, I've picked a few names including Warren Buffett, that I would like to see what they've been buying and selling. I've already talked about one on Twitter, was Warren Buffett buying Markel, which was fantastic to see. In fact, so yesterday I talked about Pat Dorsey, was the first one just at the end of the video. Yesterday I talked about Pat Dorsey's portfolio, which I think is a fascinating portfolio because it's got tech in it. The activity of buying Meta, buying PayPal. I mean, that's not so interesting to me because and a lot of these investors with big funds buy big companies. They've got a lot of money, well over like billions. Buffett way more than that, of course. Berkshire way more than that. So I kind of like to see the small caps and the smaller companies. It's interesting to me when I find some of these investors making the usually smaller bets on these companies. But Pat Dorsey's one that has companies like, well, PayPal's not small, but buying PayPal 30%. Poshmark, which is a small tech company, Reese, sort of like a small eBay for fashion, for garments and expanding categories. And we have Upwork and Wix and Roku, so some of these emerging techs, which aren't really small, but interesting to see. You don't often see that with these so-called super investor portfolios buying companies like that. So if we look at Buffett, if we look at what Berkshire Hathaway, we can't say Buffett anymore because it's not Buffett and Munger, it's Todd and Ted also. I just don't even, as Buffett said, don't even have to talk to them about it. They can just buy with an allocation. I think they have something like 30 billion each or something to work with. And but anyway, so activity for Q1 2022, we can see what jumps out at me. We know about the things because they've already hit news. Activision Blizzard, which they've been buying, and it's turned into kind of a arbitrage type situation, which Buffett did in his early days. Chevron, the oil companies. I'm not so interested in oil companies. Even if they're going to make money, the fossil fuels. I don't want to go. I'm not buying fossil fuels. More interested in clean energy. It's something that oil and fossil fuels, not something I'm interested in. More interested in lithium, the future of lithium. I've been looking into that. If you've seen a few episodes I've done on lithium, couple so far. But, RH, buying more RH. I listened to the RH earnings call where the CEO was concerned about their drop in sales, recession fears, and I see Elon Musk has talked about recession fears just in the last day, saying, I think he said that he pretty much thinks the US is in recession, I think he said, and it's going to be for the next possibly 18 months. So anyway, that's just on a tangent there. So RH, they bought 20% more RH, upped it by 20%. One thing that I'll add about these buys that we see, you do have to check that the overall holdings, because it could say they're up 300%, but it was only a small holding in the first place. So it's good to look at the holdings of the company, of the fund itself, to see can see the percentage of portfolio. So if we go to Berkshire Hathaway, we can see that 40, they have 40, nearly 43% Apple. So, that's turned into a massive, massive part of the portfolio. And Bank of America is 11.5, American Express. So some of these are really small buys, but they're small buys for Berkshire, but they're still substantial, like $500 million, for instance. So something that jumped out at me, we'll talk about one like that, was the Markel buy. So that was, Markel was 420,000 shares, and Markel shares are about $1,200 each. So for any standards, that's a substantial buy, but for Berkshire, not so much. But interesting because, as I said, as I just tweeted, if you check my Twitter, the Out of Value, I was fascinated to see that they bought some Markel, and Markel in turn, Tom Gaynor is the portfolio manager there at Markel. It's known as a baby Berkshire, if you don't know. So they set up similar insurance company. They have a venture arm where they buy companies outright, like Berkshire does, and they have a share portfolio as well. And I think Berkshire makes up about 13% of their portfolio, and in turn, Markel owns 13% of their portfolio is Berkshire, as I said, and Berkshire is now taking a stake in Markel. So, but I'm interested to see if they up that stake, and the fact that they're doing it done in the third quarter, because it's been cheaper. I started buying in 2020, and it was quite substantially cheaper than it is now. And Ally Financial, which is another one that's interesting to me, because I notice that one other investor that owns, if we go to the investors that do own Ally, is it Ally, ALLY? I hope so. Norbert Liu from Punch Card Management. It's 36% of his portfolio. Bill Nygren, obviously that's Oakmark, owns it, Howard Marks, and Warren Buffett. But Norbert Liu is a very concentrated investor, and Berkshire, like 47% is Berkshire, nearly 37% is Ally Financial, and Winnebago. So there's only 3 stocks, super concentrated, and that's Nick Sleep comes to mind as somebody else who's super concentrated. So I just wonder if Berkshire or Buffett or any of the other people there kind of were looking at Norbert Liu, what they was doing, and started to look into Ally. It's possible, but anyway. So these smaller buys are that I find the most interesting. There's Paramount Global as well. So there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 new buys. Occidental Petroleum, of course, not really interested. HP we know about. They bought some Citigroup. So they reduce. It's interesting to see what gets reduced as well. Verizon, 99% Verizon reduction. Wow, that's interesting. 100% sold out of AbbVie, Bristol Myers Squibb, 100%. Wells Fargo sold 100%. Okay. All right. So, and we kind of know some of those have hit the news. As I said, Chevron and Activision Blizzard, we already knew about. RH, we knew that they're sort of upping their stake. As I said, interesting. General Motors up to 3%. Apple adding a little bit. So just minor adds. All right. Well, talking about Warren Buffett and Berkshire took nearly 10 minutes. So I'm not going to go on. I'm going to keep this short again, but talk about some more of these, I think, because it's always a great time of the quarter to look at what investors are doing. There's a lot more. I could talk about David Tepper. Should I talk about David Tepper? Okay, well, because we're coming up to 10 minutes, I'll talk about these two and then leave the rest to another time. So David Tepper has 34. The Appaloosa Management, who's done pretty well in the last few years. Could say, value and growth at value. I don't know, but anyway. So his holdings is Alphabet. You'll see what I mean when Alphabet 13%, Amazon 11%, Meta Platforms 8%. So you could say that these are in Micron Technology, which I own 6.55. So some of those bigger ones, those really big techs, is kind of sort of safe. There's nothing, as I said, there's not really no small caps to look at or even mid caps that I can see. Uber. But so just there's a lot of in this last quarter, the activity which we're specifically looking at today. Uber added 797% from their holding. Doesn't mean that they had a big holding to begin with. Uber is actually down the list in terms of ownership. Actually, it's in the top 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So fairly substantial stake now for them. And but adding Microsoft, adding Uber, adding Amazon, buying Las Vegas Sands Corp, interesting buy. Wynn Resorts also adding, so the opening up of travel coming into play there probably. And a lot of reductions there, a lot of selling going on there in that quarter. Not necessarily big, but let's see, selling 11% Alphabet, Nordstrom, Meta selling down 20% of Meta, Macy's 20%, Micron selling 23%. Of course, we don't know what the reasons are for selling. There's usually only one reason to buy, but selling there can be many reasons, partly to sell down to buy something else, or a reduction in funds in the fund, who knows. But what else stands out? Occidental Petroleum they've sold. Interesting. Buffett's buying, he's sat there selling. T-Mobile, General Motors selling 100% of General Motors. Don't know how big that stake was. Dick's Sporting Goods selling. So yeah, Foot Locker selling 100%. All right. And Macy's they bought just last quarter. So yeah. So this is why it's interesting to see the movements. And part of the reason is that there are tens of thousands of stocks in the world. So looking at what super investors, what great investors over time doing does help to narrow down. Might get interested in something. As I said, I'm more interested in small caps these days because, I mean, how much is Apple really going to grow, or Google or Amazon? How much? Meta might be different with their play on the metaverse. The big bet on that. But I mean, how much? It's certainly not. These companies aren't certainly going to go 100x, so I'd be incredibly surprised. Maybe 10x, that would be just massive. But if you're going for small caps, mid caps, there's a bigger probability if you pick well, if they're good companies, that they're going to grow, possibly into maybe some as big as some of these big ones are now. So that's why it's interesting to see these, but I am more interested in the funds that buying mid and small caps, and they're not generally. Sometimes it's a separate list from this, and a site like Whale Wisdom will be able to tell some of the movements there. All right, that's all for now. But this is on video on YouTube and Spotify video, audio elsewhere. And I'm on Twitter at The Art of Value. Like and subscribe if you found this valuable, and I'll see you next time.